Good evening, Professor Albrecht. Thank you for being here. I'm very honored and pleased to meet you, to welcome you here in the IEA library. We are in Nantes. We have the River Loire behind us, with a beautiful winter light, and we have some minutes to talk about Earth emotions. As you can hear, I don't speak very well English, but I read it in French translation, Les émotions de la Terre. Mm-hmm. And I would like to ask you some questions about the different parts of the book.
Sure. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can begin with the first chapter. In this first chapter, where you write your some biography, mm-hmm. You explain the special relationship you have had with nature since your childhood.
Yes.
In Australia. You explain, for example, what nature has taught you, and it made me think of a quote by Plato in his Phaedrus, where Socrates says almost the contrary. He says, "I am a lover of knowledge, and the men who dwell in the city are my teachers, and not the trees or the country." So, do you think this sentence by Socrates, in what may be kind of beginning for Western philosophy, was it a mistake or just a bad choice?
Maybe it was a bad choice. I would hope that's a charitable interpretation. It's clearly wrong. The contrast between the city and nature is one which is the word artificial describes. It's artificial in many ways. It's converting raw nature into buildings, roads, the materials that humans need to live. But those materials come from nature. They can be returned to nature if we are wise in our use of them. However, if in our extraction of those materials, and if those materials are toxic, we begin to set up a divide between the town and nature. It's interesting that this divide goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. I find the reading of the ancient Greeks to be an inspiration for many ideas that I have in my book and in my writing since that book. Indeed, it's the foundation of the word symbiosis. And if the Greeks were already thinking that there's no symbiosis between the city and nature, maybe that's the beginning of the alienation between humans and the rest of nature, at least in its written form. It may have happened elsewhere in different ways, but that we have a written history that we can go back to. So it's interesting if we want to start a story about the alienation between humans and nature, maybe that sentence is where we start.
Mm-hmm. It's the wrong way from
the beginning. Wrong way from the beginning. But there were so many other sentences that we could choose where the Greeks indicate that the opposite is true, that the Stoics, for example, one of their favourite sayings was that a good life is to live a life in accordance with nature. And so as a result, I would follow the Stoics in my thinking, not the Socratic. Perhaps it was meant as a challenge. Nowadays we would call it a provoking the opposite view and the start of a genuine dialectic. So you would have to follow the debate afterwards to see what the conclusion is.
We'll talk about the Stoics a bit later, but I also thought of a French philosopher of from the last century, Gaston Bachelard. He theorized literary inspiration by associating its writer with a dominant natural element. So for him, there are writers of water, of fire, and when rereading your some biography, do you recognize yourself as a writer of air, water, fire, earth?
All
All
the
of
elements in various ways. My mother was a very strong influence on the evolution of my ideas. I would describe my mother as a pyrophile. She just loved lighting fires, and in Australia we call the backyard fire the barbecue. My mother would be the one to light the barbecue. She wasn't interested in anything else.
Mm-hmm.
She would light it and keep it going. My grandmother was also a person whose combining of the elements inspired me as a boy. She was a woman of the earth, a farmer. She was a carer of injured and sick animals. She loved the open air, and she had a small and pure creek, stream that ran through the property. And she would tell me that this place would come alive because of the goodness of the water that flowed through. So here's a woman or two, my grandmother and my mother, within which I could feel, touch, smell, admire the four seasons in all of their beauty and power. I mean, at times I remember being on their farm when there were thunderstorms and a bolt of lightning hit a tree very close to the farmhouse and blew it up. It was there 1 second and then the next it was gone. Such was the power. My grandmother was also interested in the minutiae of nature, the flowers, and in Australia we have these ground orchids which have exquisite flowers. They are flowers of the earth. You know, you only find them by looking down. You only see them if you look really hard. They're cryptic in that you find one when you were looking really hard, and then when you find one, you realise that you're surrounded by them because your senses suddenly become attuned to how their shape, how the earth, how everything around them was making them cryptic 1 second and then everywhere the next. My grandfather was also an influence here because he would ask me when we were out in the forest together I'd ask him, you know, what bird is that? And he would say, close your eyes. And I would have to close my eyes and he'd say, what can you hear? Where is it? Where do you think it is when you open your eyes? And then by doing that, he would teach me that the sound was such an important part of the landscape. If you don't want to know where the bird is, listen first and then look. And so that's the air. You know, he was able to teach me that all of our senses are important, but at particular moments, at particular times. If you focus on your hearing, for example, it opens up a world that you would otherwise completely miss. And so I think I was lucky. I had grandparents and a mother that were so closely attuned to the minutiae, the details and the majesty of nature that I couldn't help but become a nature boy.
Of course, yes. And this childhood was in a sort of paradise.
Full of spiders and deadly snakes.
Yes, and yes, I saw it. That was that was terrifying. Yes, and on the contrary, on your book, you often write about coal mines, the coal mines of the Upper Hunter Valley.
Yes,
and is this type of devastated landscape is it only an example of terrestrial forces or the archetypal nightmare landscape for these forces?
I think the latter, because for me, getting back to the first part of your question, that I grew up being what I call a terra nascent child, a lover of nature, a lover of the way nature creates. And so as I matured as a young man, I began to become aware that our culture, and by this I mean Western development culture, was beginning to destroy the very things that I loved about living, the joie de vivre, the forest, the complexity, the diversity, the beauty. And so I opposed the wood chipping of our native forests in Western Australia. Fancy turning a forest into toilet paper and tissues. I mean, it's sacrilege. So later, as I completed my studies, my family and I went to Eastern Australia from Perth on the west side, and it was there that I encountered these huge open-cut coal mines for the first time in my life. And it was the negation of everything that I had felt was good about life. I was new in New South Wales, and I was studying the new wildlife, the new botany. I was interested in the history of ornithology, and a famous British ornithologist and his wonderful wife, John Gould, and his wife Elizabeth Gould, were present in that region in 1849, 1850. And I wanted to go to the places that they visited in order to drink in the beauty and the descriptions of that place. They also worked closely with the Indigenous Australians of that area. And I learnt from reading their journals and their diaries and their letters that they had a very constructive educational relationship with the Aboriginal people. It was not one of conflict. So when I go to this place to reminisce, as it were, I don't find John Gould's and Elizabeth Gould's legacy. I don't find any Indigenous people. The forests have gone. Most of the birds have gone, and what's in its place is 500 square kilometres of open-cut coal mining, a scene of massive desolation. So much so that when people visit me in Australia and they say, "Can you take me to the Hunter Valley to have a look at the source of your inspiration?" And I'll say, "Yes, I will, but I'm taking you to the Anthropocene. And when you look at this, you will understand why it is that I'm so opposed to the direction of development that we have taken since the Industrial Revolution in particular." But I date the beginnings of the Anthropocene as the 5th of March, 1953, because that's my birthday. I'm a child of the Anthropocene.
Like many. So this was a nightmare from the beginning, those coal mines.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also another nightmare, which is submersion, because water level, sea level is getting higher and higher, and it's becoming a reality on many coastlines around the world. And do you think this metaphor of engulfment is a symbol for the Anthropocene? And is it a better symbol than the metaphor generally used, that of the Great Fire? You know, the sentence by former President Jacques Chirac, who said, "Our house is burning." So, what would be the best metaphor for it? Fire or flood?
For the Upper Hunter, it's clearly a circle. We mine the coal. In mining the coal, we use huge amounts of energy. One of the big electric shovels needs its own power station to supply the amount of electricity that it needs to dig the coal out. We then load the coal onto trucks. The trucks consume diesel at an obscene rate. The trucks will take the coal to giant trains, which are also diesel. These trains have to then travel from the coal mines to the port of Newcastle. The port of Newcastle is one of the largest coal loading ports in the world. In fact, I think it is the largest for black coal. The coal is then transferred onto huge ships that then take the coal to the power stations of the world. What do the power stations of the world do? They burn it and produce carbon dioxide. What comes back to the Hunter Valley is heat. It floods, extreme weather, and of course the port of Newcastle is subject to periodic flooding, which becomes worse every decade. So the metaphor is of the circle, because we export coal, but we import climate change. And it's a bad deal. It's a really bad deal. And yet our economy is based on this bad deal.
Oh. That's a nightmare of the Anthropocene.
Mm-hmm. So that's how I would describe it, as a circle of desolation. And it's desolation of the land, and it's desolation of what many people would call the soul, what I would call the psychoterratic, the psycho of the mind, terratic of the earth. The indigenous people had very positive psychoterratic relationship with that part of Australia, the Upper Hunter. They were called the Wonnarua people. The settlers and then the coal miners come in and destroy that very positive psychoterratic connection to the earth. And now the coal mines are bringing such misery to the Upper Hunter in terms of dust, noise, heat, explosions, that there's a new generation experiencing what I call solastalgia, which you'll probably ask me about in a minute. But this mental distress didn't have a word in English. And so this circle of distress is needed further research and further explanation. And that's how I've built my academic and personal life over the last 25 years.
Okay. And so what remains after that is solastalgia, after the mind and all that. And you are the father of this concept. But sometimes in your book you suggest that now it has its own life. And maybe sometimes it escapes you. Sometimes you say it's okay, it's a good thing. It has to live. But sometimes don't you have the feeling of being misunderstood or sometimes even betrayed?
Yes, I do. But in literary theory, there's the intentionalist fallacy, which is that the author can intend whatever they want, even in a work of fiction, and people will read and interpret whatever they like. Occasionally I find the errors and the misinterpretation so egregious that I write or I make comments. Other times I ignore them because I've got better things to do in my life than tackle a bunch of people that don't seem to read carefully enough. In many cases they don't read at all, or if they do, they read secondary sources and don't read me. I find that frustrating, but I think every academic finds that frustrating. Every writer finds it frustrating. So I don't feel alone in that respect. I think overwhelmingly I would say that solastalgia in the last 22, 23 years has become well established in the literature, both fiction and non-fiction, throughout the world in multiple languages. And unfortunately it means that it's successful. And I say unfortunate because it's the very opposite of what I want in the world. So I describe solastalgia now as a pandemic. It's similar to COVID in that we all are subject to it now. We are caught in its web, which is a good metaphor. The age of solastalgia is upon us. It is an expression of the Anthropocene, and I want out of both.
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. So we have to go out of Anthropocene. Mm-hmm. We have to take a new road to Symbiocene. Mm-hmm. And I told you we had to speak about the Stoics of antiquity. They classified fear and desire among the four great human passions, with pleasure and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And you use one and the other successively. Fear of the actual world and desire for a new world. But which of the two seems to you to be the most effective in convincing our fellow human beings to make an end, to leave the Anthropocene?
That's a very difficult question, and I appreciate the thought that goes into it. Fear. Fear can drive me in two different directions. One, sometimes I have such fear in me that I wish to sit in the corner and rock back and forth gently, having another bottle of red wine. Mm-hmm. Other times I have a response which I had to name it because it didn't have a name in English, Terre fury, earth anger. Mm-hmm. So my fear can flip from one side to the other. Most of the time it's Terre fury, the anger is a positive anger. I want to stop that which is causing my anxiety, my distress. I want to stop it for other people too. There's a longer term ambition, which is to make sure that my children, my grandchildren, and all life don't have to experience that kind of distress. So it's a big picture response. I sometimes don't know which way I'm going to flip. The older I get, I think the angrier I get. It's the frustration that we are not addressing the very foundations of the problems that everybody now understands quite well. And so a number of scholars talk about the term eco-paralysis. I don't like eco in front of anything anymore because it's so abused, particularly by those that smash ecosystems. But eco-paralysis, I think, describes another position that I find myself in, and I think it's common. I just don't know what to do. You know, I've spent all my life as an educator, environmental educator. I have participated in active protest movements. I've taken solastalgia to court and helped people win court cases against the miners, only to have the state of New South Wales overturn the legal decisions with a new legislation that just simply reversed the previous legal precedent that had been set. So with a long history of fighting the Anthropocene, there are times when I feel so tired, so worn out, so defeated that I have eco-paralysis. I think maybe I'll just go for a walk and enjoy the birds, and that is something that normally I do that. I look at the birds, I listen, I come back to my desk, and I have terror fury. I'm ready to start again. So I'm still at the age of nearly 72, full of energy. I'll work as harder now because I see the problems just getting greater. So the complex answer to your question is I feel both. It's like a pendulum. I come here and I'm with colleagues and students that inspire me that this is the right track. And then I go and watch some media news on the lunacy. I call it the great, a new category of humans, deludians. I see the deludian in chief in the United States pronouncing the end of this atmospheric organisation, which produces brilliant work on climate change. So it's that moment I think I'm in trouble. I can't live with the delusions that are taking over. But at the same time, when I am with students, when I'm with young people, when I'm with my colleagues who seem to understand the emotions of the earth, which is what the book is all about, I feel community, a sense of community. I also feel a sense that the zeitgeist is not the delusions. The zeitgeist is actually its opposite. We're trying to find a way to get them out of power because they have the money, they have the power, they have the police, they have the military. It's a revolutionary idea that we need. And that's precisely the reason why I created the concept of the Symbiocene. The Anthropocene is a massive meme cultural replicator. It's no good trying to fight it with a water pistol. You have to come up with an equally big idea, which is entirely its opposite. And so, again, in the last 10 years, that's been the major focus of my work, is to counter the Anthropocene with a meme that's so large that it encompasses every aspect of human life in all of its wonderful diversity.
And to achieve this, you have several ways, and in your book you cite many scientists, but also artists, and you even reproduce one of your poems of Terre in the book. Would you say, like the German poet Novalis, that the poet understands nature better than the man of science? Or would you say that these different approaches to nature and environmental issues are themselves symbiotic?
I think they are complementary, symbiotic, and I think they are coming closer together because I'm a realist and a materialist. I read the science, particularly the life sciences, biological sciences, and particularly in the last 50 years, my lifetime precisely as well, we've discovered so much about partnerships in life that we never knew before. And so the poets and the scientists are coming closer together. The ontology is now a Venn diagram. It used to be separate, and now there's an overlap, and I think they can inform each other. Science by itself is powerful and interesting, but it's pretty boring at times. Whereas poetry is inspiring, it's interesting, it moves me. And that's where emotion comes from. What is it that moves you? It's the emotions. That's where the word immovere, that which moves you, it's where it comes from. And so I think we need the facts and we need the emotions. I think good science and good poetry go together. Goethe is a prime example of a fantastic scientist and a wonderful poet. We just need more of him.
More. And what moves you to is in one of your last chapters in the book is spirituality, and you have some very nice words about Gaia and the Geist.
Yeah, I call it the Geist.
Geist. And you evoke new forms of spirituality adapted to the Symbiocene.
Yes. And
you propose that they do without any divinity. So does this spirituality appear to you as a supplement of the soul, or a simple void to fill in the human psyche?
Again, a difficult question. I think we have an affinity with life. We are from life. We are life ourselves. And we're now beginning to understand that we're not autonomous selves, somehow living separate from not only other life forms but other humans. This is where Margulis and others are so important, because her concept, made popular by her, of the hollow biont it's a conceptually revolutionary idea, because we are not what we thought we were. We are multiple organisms all coexisting at the same time. Most of them we can't see. The ones that we occasionally see seem very shocking, like our eyelash mites, that, you know, we're inhabited by hundreds of little mites that eat the dead cells at the base of our eyelashes. People interested in beauty are shocked when I tell them that they mate on your face at night time. However, it's the microbiome that's the big story that I have. The recognition that our life is shared by 1 trillion others. There are microbiomes of the ears, the nose, the throat. The baby needs exposure to the mother's microbiome in order to have a healthy immune system. In other words, this invisible world has now become visible through the power of microscopes and the wonderful work of the Dutch in inventing and refining the microscope. It begins to replace what we understood already, but in symbolic terms. So symbiosis and our knowledge of it becomes a way of explaining that which was profoundly mysterious in the past. Death and disease, for example. We now have the ability to produce a death certificate for everything. It tells us exactly why we die. Before the microscope, before the discovery of bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea, you know, the story is still evolving, but people had no idea why death would occur when there was apparently no cause, because they couldn't see. So there's the idea that this connection to life was, in non-literate traditional people, hugely important part of their spiritual belief systems. The animism, that all things alive was a product of their understanding of direct causes, and when invisible things happen, or bad things happen, like a bolt of lightning takes someone's life, they invoked symbolic and complex stories to account for these otherwise inexplicable things. Why did children die? And so I think that's the thread of spirituality that I want to perpetuate. The animism is still with us, and we now know a lot more about what and why things happen in the world of life. We just don't have in our modern forms of life any way of expressing our secular spirituality. The Geist, Ged, is an ancient root word which means to unite. It's the root word for words like good, together, gather. That word, the gut, is straight from that Indo-European root word. And I thought, well, it actually says exactly what I want, but it needed to be united with the idea of the spirit. Some way, the words that convey spirit needed to be connected to the Ged word. So Geist, I dropped a few letters here and there to make it work. Otherwise, people take one look at it and run in the opposite direction. But, you know, GH is not a difficult word in English. We use ghost without people having a conniption or a worry. So I think it's a word that I put up as a provocation, as stimulus, as for other people to develop further. I just wanted to make sure that I did not neglect the spiritual aspects of the psychoterratic. I feel it, I sense it, I never had a language for it, it was never part of organised religion. I oppose hierarchies of the sort that not currently dominate us, so the church is a good example of the very power structures that I oppose. So I couldn't borrow from even my own Western culture for a metaphor or a word that would help. I don't wish to appropriate Indigenous beliefs. I think they have a huge amount to say to us, but I want them to say it, not for me to interpret the world for them or to say that I know more than they do. So this effort to develop a secular spirituality, I think, is part of an integral part or a facet of the symbiote scene. It's not all of it, but I think it would be neglectful to ignore the Indigenous and indeed Eurocentric spiritual traditions and say that they have nothing at all to offer. They all have something to offer, but for me, they've been lost in the black hole of organised religion and formal religious structures and documents that, for me, don't make any sense whatsoever. I would rather seek my wisdom elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. So we are almost finished, and I would like to finish with some very short questions. Mm-hmm. All of them being, which of the two do you prefer? If I tell you to resist or disappear?
Resist always. I cannot disappear. Or as I'm dying, I'm going to make a lot of noise. Even inside my mycelium coffin, I'm going to be hammering on the lid saying, Terre leben, let the earth live.
If I tell you fatum or fabula?
Oh, no, you'll have to explain both of those.
The fatum is destiny, fabula is the fable,
right.
Power of imagination.
Okay. I don't believe in destiny. All of our fables up till now, I think, have failed us. So I have to find a third way.
A new fable?
Yeah, no.
No?
No, it's
something different?
Something different, yeah. I don't know. A fable in English implies fantasy, that it may be desirable, like the word utopia. A vision of the future which cannot take place. Mm. My story, to use a different word, would be a vision of the future which is a utopia, but it's a utopia. It's a good place.
It has to be.
It has to be. The other fables will take us further into the Anthropocene, not necessarily as a positive act, but maybe just out of ignorance, because we will continue to watch cats on YouTube while the world burns.
That's it. And the last one is maybe the most difficult. Garden or library?
So the garden of ideas comes from the library. The library is like a good garden. It has unity in diversity, or at least it used to before the government started cutting funds to the libraries and universities. So the analogy is a good one. I have solastalgia for both if they're being hammered by cuts, by climate change, the warming. How can you garden in 47-degree temperatures? So my reaction is that the garden of ideas is where I like to exist. I want the garden and its soil to be flourishing. I want the library to be full of stimulating books. Maybe it's a steady state in that as the old redundant books become less valuable, the new books come in, so it's like the steady state economy. But I want the library to be continually renewed. I've spent a life in books, so they are my friends, my lovers almost. There are so many precious books that I have. I couldn't live without them. And so there's a very close partnership between gardens and libraries. I think they both hold unity and diversity, identity and difference, all of the words that convey this idea that life is symbiosis. It's the coming together in partnerships of diverse, different types of creatures that have different capabilities and different aspects and features, but nevertheless, partnership is an important word. It's suggesting that they are equal partners. Pa means equal. Murray Bookchin, the eco-anarchist, described it as an equality of unequals, that we begin to understand that these differences are not differences of prestige or wealth. They are differences which make life more diverse and more richer, more fecund, more fertile, more interesting. And that's where I think if I can live in the garden of ideas, I'm living in the best library, I'm living in the best garden, I'm experiencing the joie de vie.
Thank you very much, Albrecht. Thank you.
I love talking to you.